So that NAM show. After that, you're continuing to have interactions with him and Dweezil. Of course, and you are friends. Um, Dweezil tells a lot of his stories. About obviously the one where Ed came to his house and he's talked about the superhero. With a jumpsuit. I mean, I can only. That's amazing. That's an amazing story.
Yes,
But
it is.
your other moments with Dweezil, you were at the same time recording bands and you had your studio going. And Dweezil, Dweezil's always creating. He's got some new things he's doing now. Of course, his podcast, his Van Halen
Hmm.
podcast, fantastic. His last one, Satriani had to cut out early, and he did the end of it.
Yeah.
Fantastic,
Yeah.
by himself, talking
Yep.
about everything, the way he broke it down. It's fantastic, man. It's just beautiful.
Yep.
And Dweezil's always been one of his biggest champions and always fans.
Hmm.
Always when I see Dweezil, I think, man, like you and me. Dweezil and I we were just the
Yeah.
same dude in a different place. We're like some kind of brothers. I don't know, from all the universe. But yeah,
Yep.
man. So from that point on in '91, you get into a situation with Dweezil where you start doing this demo searching for Eddie, and kind of fill me in on this. I understood that Eddie went back to the demos and to cull out information or songs for different kind of truth. We knew that he had used some old stuff, and then what we didn't know is, and I think you brought this up in other interviews, is that later he did it again, but we never had that album. We never had that second album come from them. Tell me your role in that. I mean, this is like one is I thought he would have all this material, or his son would, or somebody would. But I mean, it makes sense to me that he would go to Dweezil
Hmm.
because Dweezil's a big fan, but he's also he's a historian almost of Eddie's career, but he's also close to Eddie. So
Yeah.
that makes sense to me. So give me a little feedback on how that all starts
Sure.
and all that whole path.
Okay, first, so a few things. So basically, through the '90s, I started playing in bands and was trying to get a band off the ground. And it wasn't until the late '90s that I got my studio space and started a business. And then that became my sole source of what I was doing. And then I started making records for others and became a self-taught producer, engineer, and all this kind of stuff. So I would see Dweezil, through that time frame here and there. We would check in with each other as guitar player friends would do. He'd play something over the phone or vice versa or whatever, and get together when we could. And then also see Van Halen when we could. But to get to specifically to your point, so all along I started collecting anything I could back in the mid '80s. With the first thing that I got was Van Halen in Maryland, 1981,
Right.
and I got that from my friend Brian, the guy who said, "Hey, move out here," right? So anytime I could get something that wasn't, that was of them, I wanted to have it or hear it or whatever. And so Dweezil is the same way, and a lot of people are. So we just want to hear the things and expand and listen to everything we can. So we're basically in the like around 2009, 2010 area. So we're really jumping ahead.
Mhm.
So at this point, I've made a ton of records, worked with a lot of different people, whatever. Dweezil starts Zappa Plays Zappa,
Mhm.
relearns how to play the guitar and changes his whole approach, starts taking lessons from this guy named Ted Green, and just changes everything because he now has to go embark on learning his father's stuff.
Mhm.
So in 2010, he has a contract to fulfill for a bunch of concerts that need to be mixed and given to fans who bought certain packages.
Okay.
And his engineer that's to do the work, something happens where the guy can't do the work. And Dweezil's also going through some heavy personal things at that time. And so as his friend, I told him that, hey man, if you need me to help you in any way, let me know. I'm here to help. So after a couple weeks, he called me and he goes, "Hey, you know what? I really could use your help. Can you come help me?" So I did. So I started going up to the house, Frank's house, and the studio, which is called the UMRK, the Utility Muffin Research Kitchen.
Right.
And so I'm now, instead of working on a Pro Tools Mac setup, I'm now having to learn a Nuendo on a PC,
Right.
and to try and get these concerts mixed. And at the same time, I do my sessions at my studio during the day, and then I go up there at night and I just help him out. Right. So I got a gig where this guy came into the studio. Like this would literally be like 2 weeks before Dweezil asks me to come up to the house. I get this call from the studio referral service for this guy who owns a studio in the area, but he's booked at his studio. And it turns out he's booked with Kim Fowley, if you know who that name is.
Sure.
So his studio's blocked out and he needs to do another session. And so is there a studio nearby where he could do this session recording rhythm tracks for this band? And so the studio referral service refer him to me. So he calls me up, and this guy's name is Mike Wolf. So Mike Wolf comes to my studio and he's recording these drum tracks or something. And then when the session dwindles down, he sees a photo that I have on the wall of Edward Van Halen out in my lounge. And so we start talking about Van Halen. And at this time, I had already done these things where I had met a drummer and I wrote some original songs that were trying to emulate what I considered to be unreleased classic Van Halen style songs. Mm-hmm. And I put those up on YouTube, and Jeff Hausman from the Van Halen news desk found those, and he called me and he really liked them and he wanted to do an interview with me. So I do an interview with him. So anyways, I'm talking to this guy and I'm going, yeah, I wrote these, and he's like, he wanted to hear my demos and I played them for him. And he's like, damn, he really liked them. And then I told him, yeah, I got all these other Van Halen recordings and stuff. And so I played him some stuff. And then he told me that he has a bunch of old recordings because Mike grew up out in Pasadena. Mm-hmm. And he has a bunch of first generation recordings that are literally like from somebody who used to work for the band. Okay. Right. So sorry for the long thing, but I had to set that up. Right. So now I'm up at Dweezil's and I'm helping him out. And one day, literally there for maybe a week. And one day Ed calls and asks Dweezil, hey, do you have any old recordings and things? I'm trying to get some recordings together of stuff from our archives, because Ed wasn't a collector of his archives. He's a collector of his music that he recorded, at 5150 and stuff like that. But the earlier stuff and whatever, it's like he didn't seem to have an interest in that until now. Right. So he asked Dweezil if he could help get some recordings and stuff together. Do you know anybody and all this kind of stuff? So he gets off the phone and he tells me, oh, Ed just called and, actually I was sitting next to him when he was talking to him. So, and he said, Ed wants help getting together some old recordings and stuff like that. And I said, well, I have a huge collection. And I said, but not only that, I just met the guy who's got the shit, Wow. Like I just met him. So I know somebody else. And so Dweezil was like, well, call him up and tell him to give all the stuff that he's got to Ed. And I'm like, he's not going to do that. He's not a bootlegger. He's not selling stuff or whatever. He's a keeper of this archive of these Pasadena guys. So it's like, he's going to want to be a part of something. He's not just going to come give me his stuff. I said, if you can set up an a meeting or something, I'm sure then he'd be open to doing something along those lines, right? Mm-hmm. So because he doesn't share what he has, you know what I'm saying? He came over to my studio and played me stuff, but he didn't like, here's copies for you. He didn't do that. Right. And I didn't ask him. Just like when I played him stuff, he didn't ask me for copies of it. He just said, oh, you shared with me, I'll come share with you, right? Sure. So neither of us asked each other for anything. So and the stuff he played floored me. I can tell you, I spent my life following this band and thinking that I've known them at their apex. No.
Wow. There's
recordings of them that sound better than they've ever sounded. I mean, now that's not to say a person who's seen them at some gig that, that's subjective, right?
Sure.
But what I'm saying is this stuff that's recorded, that this first generation recordings of them in the clubs, there's stuff that you've never heard that sounds better than everything else. They're better than you think. That's what I'm trying to say.
Wow. Yeah.
I know, it's incredible. I had to take a breather. I told them, stop. I need some time because my heart was going to explode. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Wow. So anyways, Dweezil calls Ed and says, hey, my friend and another guy he knows, they got some stuff, but they want to do a meeting. And Ed's like, well, I don't want anybody coming to my house. Right. And Dweezil's like, well, we can do it here. And he's like, okay, that sounds cool. So we set a time. And so, we had a rough estimate of the time. So I needed to now call the guy, Mike, and see. So imagine now, I just met him 2 weeks ago or whatever. We did a session together. He's already come by the studio a second time to play stuff. So we had a listening party, him and I. Now I call him up and I said, hey, Mike, how's it going? He's like, it's good, Craig, what's going on? I go, hey, Mike, if you were to give copies of anything that you have in your archive to anybody on earth, who would that be? He's just like, what a strange question, right?
Right.
He's thinking about, he's like, I don't know. I guess somebody in the band or Ed. And I said, what are you doing Thursday? And he's like, what are you talking about? I said, dude, we're going to have a meeting with Ed. He's like, shut up. And I'm like, no, we're going to have a meeting. And so the deal is that you put together 10 CDs of the best stuff that you have in your archive that's never been released, that old cool songs and ideas that could be helpful, because he's kind of got a writer's block going on and he wants to see what's available in the archive. So Mike put together his best 10 CDs collection, made 10 discs, and I did the same thing. So we had this meeting up there. Ed came over and it was great. This was the first time in my life where I had ever seen his eye whites completely bright white, totally sober. Yeah. And when he came in, he walked straight up to me and he just looked me deep in my eyes and just gave me this big, deep hug. I was like, I can't believe this is happening. Wow. He was so cool, so nice, so present. So right there, right. And I'd never seen him like that.
Because like you said before, and I think in some other interviews that being with Ed in all those situations, there's so much going on around him, so many people, so much distraction. Even when you and Dweezil were with him, still there's other people, even the other band members or whatever. But when you finally get to this point, this is starting to be much more one-on-one, and you are now, you're at a point with your relationship with Ed where he trusts you, and now you're going to a new level with him with your relationship. And this whole thing you're talking about is the next generation of that. So
I would agree with that. I would say so, but I would also tell you that at that meeting, he looked into me in a way that he never looked into me before. And it's almost like a high level predator smelling you out.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It wasn't like he looked into my deepest, you know what I mean? He was like analyzing and you could sense it. I could sense it and see it. I'm like, oh wow, he's really trying to see what he can pick up here. He's really looking into me. It's like, wow. But I just remember being so thrilled that he seemed to be so happy and so in a good place. And so I would just say present, and also, like I said, the white of his eyes. Like I've never seen that. I have stories that are quite the opposite. So was beautiful to see that. So, and then of course, how open and welcoming he was, to give us the hugs that he did. And that seemed to be his nature. You hear that. It's not like it was exclusively for us. This is where he was in his life now. This is how he interacted, I think, with anybody and everybody. In other words, I think there's an acceptance going on with who he is, and you can tell he's more. It's just, I don't know. It was a really beautiful thing. So we have this meeting. You're right. There's just the four of us. We're listening to the archive. We're pointing out things. to him, put things of note that, that Mike thinks are going to be good ideas. Maybe check this tune out, listen to this tune. We're just listening to stuff. Dweezil's just putting on different recordings, and we're listening to it, and we're talking, and it's great. And then there's a point in I should share this because it's pivotal to me. And so in this meeting, Ed's sitting right across from me. He's looking me right in the eyes, and he's literally 2 feet away from me on the other side of this little table, and he starts talking to me. And the same thing happened to me that happened to me in 1981. I hear about it later, where all of a sudden I'm having this otherworldly experience begins to happen to me. And while he's looking at me and while he's talking to me, I don't hear a word he says. I can't hear what he's saying. And that same voice that came into my head when I was 12 comes back into my head, and it says, it's now time for you to get off this guy's shoulders, get off of his back, leave him be. He needs to lighten his load. And you need to now synthesize what you've extracted and learned, basically, or acquired from his example, and you need to filter it into your own voice. So that was like this crazy, like, whoa, okay, so now I'm getting the answer to my journey here. It's like, okay, you've soaked up what you can now, dude. What are you going to do with it? What are you going to say with it? So I left that meeting and I quit playing guitar. I just stopped. I put it down, and everything about my guitar playing then changed. I took a year off, and, goes into this whole other thing. And that's all apropos to this record that I've just completed. But back to Ed, that meeting was great. We helped him out. And then they wrote A Different Kind of Truth. That was that.
Right.
So
we know that he was pulling stuff from these archives that you guys provided to kind of backfill whatever he wasn't going to be able to put together, or to inspire more pieces, or a little bit of everything. Probably.
Yeah, I think one thing is that as an artist, you realize that your ideas really can be great no matter what stage you're in your career.
Right.
And it's something as prolific as the output of that band and their unreleased material. It only really makes sense to me especially if you're trying to keep that spirit of what the early version of the band was, but also bring it to where you are now. Right. That you would consult your archives. And the band had a habit of doing that throughout the years, so it wasn't anything new for them.
Sure. But not this deep, not into the bootlegs, not into like these unheard by even him recording himself.
Yeah. That I guess that's true, but it's like, if you just think of like House of Pain or something, it's like, well, that was on an early demo, and then that was played in the clubs, and then it ends up on their 6th record, with Dave. I mean, and at that time they had been a band since 73, 74, and now it's 84, 83, 84, and they're just 10 years later. So I don't know. To me, I just see it as kind of like, well, yeah, that's what anybody would do when it's like, it's not, basically Ed wasn't, from my understanding, he wasn't getting the ideas as they used to come, and sobriety had a lot to do with that.
Sure.
And so, to me, it's just, I'm not suggesting you're saying this, but I don't see it as anything negative to go, you know what, I got to see what I haven't used, the value of the things I've created, because I created it. So it doesn't matter when I did it.
Sure.
I want to see what's cool. And
sure.
So anyways.
Yeah, I was just saying that, as far as him going back in his archive, or, for some reason I would have thought that Wolfgang would have, there was some talk, at least my perception was that Wolfgang had kind of said, hey, Dad, we should look at this, and then I guess this is what he did. He went to Dweezil.
Yeah.
Because I don't know all those answers to that, but yeah, obviously he's going to go back through any archive he can get and look
He
And
did. He did tell me that this he was going to give the stuff to his kid.
mhm.
So, that he had a big part of whatever material they were doing. So I knew that there's going to be stuff that he heard, and then it's going to, because his son was also in the band.
So he was
And
filtering it through Wolfgang as well.
I believe so. In some way, he was definitely
I kind of
involved.
heard. I mean, that was kind of talked about. I think even Wolfie said it, but yeah, there was some
Yeah.
collaboration with him and Wolfgang on that.
Yeah. Also, because I think he chose their set list that they would do live and all of that sort of stuff. So I just think, Ed was in a different place. I don't think he had any, he didn't want to relive the past or anything, but, I mean, I know that things that he told me about, he was very much looking forward to something different in the future. But,
Right.
in terms of the band, and fulfilling the contracts, and then writing stuff that is going to, have the weight of what it was. It's like the new ideas weren't coming. So, but
Sure.
yeah, his son being a part of like, oh, this one's cool, Dad, or no, let's not do that one or whatever. I think he was leaning on him for years by that point,
Right.
as to, well, what do you think? Let's do what he says. So, because
Sure.
I think Ed was trying to do other things in
Well, yeah,
his
Ed's
life.
life got so busy, with the company, with EVH gear, and all that happened, and then we there's such an evolution with him over in all the things he was involved in at this point. So you have to
Mm,
remember how busy he was just in general, trying to create products, deal with that,
mm.
be the musician, be all these things, right?
Totally,
And,
yeah.
and so yeah, so his life changed dramatically. One of the things we didn't touch on earlier is that for a long time Edward didn't seem to want to, like when you were talking about the shoes earlier, he didn't seem to want to capitalize on his stripes, his guitars, any of that stuff until maybe he made the Kramer Ernie Ball change, but then still he didn't really go all in till way later, way down the road, and EVH Gear and Fender really is when he made the big change. But yeah, he always had that thing where I don't know whether he just didn't want everybody to have what he had, but then he decided he did. or what happened with that. But anyway, yeah, he got so busy, and then this whole thing with the second coming of Van Halen in 2012 was another layer, and Wolfgang was definitely helping him for that. So you get those together for him, and then you take this time off, but then you're asked again to
Yeah.
do this again. So
Yeah.
tell me how that comes about.
Yeah. It gets better. Yeah.
Oh, let's get
so,
it.
so basically, now we're in 2014, and they have to now fulfill the contract for the second record, which ultimately ended up being that live record, but they were going to initially try and create another record. And so Ed wanted to go back to those recordings that we made for him, but he was doing construction and things were all a mess and he couldn't find the recordings. So he reached out to Dweezil again and said, hey, do you think they would make me those CDs again? Because I can't find anything, and we got to do this other thing. And so Dweezil said, well, I don't know, Ed, I'm on tour. So you're going to have to talk to Craig directly. And so he's like, okay. And then Dweezil calls me and says, hey, guess what? Ed's going to call, I was like, I think it took me 35 years to manifest that, moment.
Right.
Here's his number, put it in your phone because I can't wait to see my phone light up and say Edward Van Halen. You know what I'm saying? And of course, he called me early in the morning when I had the phone turned off. So I woke up to his voicemail.
Right.
But yeah, so he called, and so he basically came over to my studio, and then I would say in many respects gave me kind of the greatest gift of my life. No offense to my wife or my parents or something along those lines, but as for what we're talking about, and he spent a few hours with me in my home space, just in my studio, and just him and I, and that is the dynamic I suggest and recommend to everybody with whoever they're inspired by, because you just have a totally different flow. And, so we talked about so many different things. And so basically, I made the recordings for him again.
Mm-hmm.
I made I gave him a printout of things to notice. I'll tell you for the listeners. So for those of you who know your bootlegs, the song Bright Lights, Big City from 1980, that's what he seemed to love most hearing. He's like, oh, we did a blues. He called it a blues. He's like, oh, I want to hear the blues one. He loved listening to that, and I told him because there's such a cool harmonic pattern that he does in the verses of that tune, that it's like, yeah, it's a cover, but it's like, he can make that original. It's nothing like the original version of the show tune or whatever that Dave wanted to do. Mm-hmm. So, but he really loved hearing them doing a blues. That was one of his favorite things. But the other thing is that I actually had the recordings of him when he was in Mammoth. And so I got to give him his, recordings of Mammoth. And we listened to that show or that gig that they did in Mammoth together. And he just tripped out on hearing himself because he's got to be 15 years old in that recording, and this is when he really sounds like Clapton, and he's singing. So that was an unreal experience to listen to that with him side by side, literally shoulder to shoulder, leg to leg, just in front of the speakers, just like, it's just, wow.
So how was the quality on that recording? Was it good?
It's great. Yeah. For what it is. I mean, it sounds like they're in the back of a small pool hall or something, and there's like 8 people at the gig or something. But they're just crushing it. And he's just blazing, and it's full on. It just sounds like Cream.
Mm-hmm.
That's when, for all the people that think, oh, Ed always talked about Clapton, he doesn't sound like Clapton unless you really slow him down or you see him play Crossroads or something, on that one recording that's out there. Mm-hmm. But if you listen to them then in Mammoth, they literally sound like Cream, Al too. And, he does Toad, his drum solo and stuff. But Ed singing and all of that is just unique. It's not like the vocals are up front and close. He's belting it out. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of wash. Sounds like they're playing on a cement floor or something with cement walls or whatever it is. But it's great, because it's the genesis of what that band is and became. So
what were his comments about listen? Well, he was listening to this.
It was more a look of just like, like he was just stupefied and lost the moment and then traveling back in time. And, like anybody, just, wow, like he tripped out on it. He loved it. I mean, it was just really, really cool. Wow. I'll tell you what, one thing that I did which was funny, is that when he came over, for those who know this is, again, you're going into the real old archives of the bootlegs. For those of you who know of a awesome band called Captain Beyond. Mm-hmm. So Captain Beyond, they used to cover some of their tunes and whatnot. So when he came in, I was actually listening to Captain Beyond, and I had it on at low volume. And so, like, he wasn't even in my place for 30 seconds. And he's like, hey, what is that? And I'm like, that's Captain Beyond. He's like, Captain Beyond, we used to play Captain, because I knew he would like that, and he loved it. And he started telling me how we used to play their songs, and we learned it they had a record with a skip in it, and they learned how to play it with a skip and stuff like that. And
right.
So
I've heard that story before.
Yeah, it's a true story. And so he just started, I got him to acclimate. Actually, the studio space that I had was quite magical, and you would walk through the threshold and it would take you back in time and it would talk to you, because there was so many projects that were done over the years. And so the walls, everything about it just had a feel, you're walking into old history, and it, especially sensitive people who are aware, they know it right away. Right. And so even though he wasn't interested in that when he came by, because, I'm just coming by, I'm going to get some recordings and, hang out for a bit and be on my way. He wasn't expecting to stay as long as he did. And what the conversations we got into, because he heard my whole life story. We talked about everything, and this new record that I've been working on and that I just released and finished. Like he was a part of all of that, because he instigated it. I shared that with him. He was interested in it, he contributed to ask questions, help motivate me, all of this kind of stuff. I mean, it's like he just like the stuff you see online where he goes over to people's places and he helps them out, or it's like he didn't have to do what he did, but he did. And so it blossomed even more to where he was at my place for like 3 hours. And like I said, I sent you a photo where he's looking at my Echoplex.
Right. I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah. So my Echoplex is serial number 5155.
Oh, wow.
Close. Yeah. So we were.
You told him that?
Yeah. He was checking it out. He was
Wow.
he was looking at it, and because just the gear in general, and also it's my Marshall that I have. I actually got that from Matt Bruck.
Oh, really?
And it was through another guy who works for Van Halen on the bass side of things. His name was Craig DeFalco, and Matt brokered or set up the introduction for me to buy that back in the early 90s. Matt and I used to share a rehearsal studio together through the 90s for a few years or a couple of years. I don't remember exactly,
right.
But so that was just cool. So Ed was looking at my rig and all of that stuff. So I was showing him that. And, but mostly we just got into some really great conversation, and some very personal sorts of things, for whatever reason. Like I said, when I was playing darts with him that one day, like he just opened up to me in a way where it's like, do I know you like that? Like, wow, you're really sharing some personal stuff with me. I appreciate that. It was super cool. But that's our relationship kind of just jumped right into that. And it kind of picked back up at like that, at that deep level. You know what I mean? We're talking about some really heavy stuff. So that was a meeting that was an amazing day. And I know that Mike also had a meeting where Ed came to my place and I gave him recordings. Mike got to go to 5150 and give him recordings. And I know that was incredibly enriching and special for him as well. So it's just a really at the basic level, it is. And I should also, at the basic level, you're trying to help your mentor. We're just, and so to have these stories go along with it, it just makes it even better. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I never could have envisioned it leading to something along these lines, but to be able to help him get things together. But obviously it didn't help him very much on the second time because they didn't do nothing. And they were just like, Dave, you choose the live show and let's just get this over with,
Right.
So,
yeah, the ebb and flow with the band, with Dave and their relationship, complex is not the word for them. I mean, we, as Van Halen fans, we know that we just never knew what to know about what was going to happen with Van Halen and that their relationship. It was magical on a creative level, and for sure we were all blown away by that. So when we talked about this disarming legend, the ability that Edward had, like when you just now said this about how he would jump into a personal conversation with you that would almost totally erase this legendary status of this man standing next to you or talking to you and eye to eye. He had like a way, maybe he learned how to do this over the years, where he wanted, like you said, he didn't want to be doted over, and he sort of turned it on you in a way that almost erased this thing within you. I said this before on my show. I have a friend who was on tour with him in '95. And I cornered him years after this because I never got a chance to ask him what Edward was like. What Edward, come on, man, tell me now you can tell me everything that happened. He's been on my show now, but I said to him, what was Edward like? He goes, dude, he was just a regular guy. And I said to him, dude, he was not a regular guy. That guy played guitar on Van Halen 1. What's wrong with you, man? But, when I met him at the Smithsonian, I got that warm, vibe. I think we all knew he was a sensitive guy.
Yeah.
But he also, like you said, almost had an empath ability to feel what you were feeling.
Yeah.
And he put that out in a way that we felt what he was feeling. He was a unique, in all the guitar and all that aside, he had a unique ability to connect with people, just either through his smile, whether he shook your hand and hung out with you for 3 hours. Everybody that I talk to who's had that opportunity is exactly like you. Mm-hmm. They almost lose this. You didn't lose your worship of him as a child, but you separate them somehow. You learn that he is that regular guy, but he's also this icon. But you can separate those somehow with the way he approaches you. What do you think about it?
Well, first of all, I like the way you explain that and your take on that, because I've never thought about that. And so when I think about it, I think you're probably right. Like it probably was a technique for him to, like, how can I get beyond all this star stuff with people and connect with them on a regular level. So yeah, I mean, we all seem to, like you say, we all share the same similar kind of a story like that. So it kind of in a way makes sense, that it could be a way that he can circumvent quickly or sweep it away. So it's just like, we can get down to it. Like, please don't, you don't need to give me the star treatment or whatever, you know what I mean? And so that could very well be.
Yeah, Brad Chalinsky and Chris Gill from Guitar World I had on. They said that he preferred that kind of situation where it was just you hanging out. He didn't like to be in situations like where there would be a lot of that. He preferred to have that one-on-one like he did with you, where he could get down to real conversation. He seemed to be, and this is for you to say, a real conversationalist, somebody who enjoyed conversation.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean it's in the photos that I shared with you or sent you. I actually have. I took, because I was prepared for this, I have like 95 photos with him.
Wow.
Right. And it's because, we really hit it off. And he told me when he was at my place, he's like, when he's getting ready to go or whatever, he's like, hey man, I want you to stay in touch with me. And I blew it off. I was just like, yeah, sure, whatever. And he's like, no. He's real serious. I want you to stay in touch with me. I had a real good time, And I was like, okay, no problem. I will stay in touch with you. Like, he was adamant. It's serious. And I could feel that. And I was shocked and I was so grateful. And so I did that. But the thing about the photos is that I knew that he was coming to my home space, my home turf. Mm-hmm. And that this was a special occasion. And how do I do this without it being, a problem? So the night before, I have this little GoPro camera, mm-hmm. and I set it for, I had it charged and I had it set to do every 2 seconds. It's going to take a picture. Right. Mm-hmm. So we're done with hanging out and everything. And I said to him, hey, Ed, has Clapton ever been to your studio? And he goes, Eric? No. And I said, would you get a photo with him if he came by? And he goes, yeah. And I said, can I get a photo? And he laughed and he goes, yeah. He thought that was great. And so turned it on. He starts making faces, and because he sees the light. I go, I got it set for auto shot. It's taken every 2 seconds. So he starts posing and having fun with it and doing stuff with me. And then he tells me, he goes, oh, Al's got that camera. And he's, you can see, so in these photos that I took, all of a sudden now I got 95 photos with him, because now he's hamming it up basically with me, right, and doing all these different poses. And so the camera's still going and we're having a conversation, and I should send you some of these other ones, but there's like, I got him to bust out laughing so hard that he's literally cocked back with his mouth wide open, like holding his gut, from something that I said to him. Mm-hmm. Now, how do you get to share experiences like that that's to me is like, yeah, he's the greatest guitar player that ever walked the earth, depending on who you talk to. That's my view. And yeah, he contributed all this other stuff. And yeah, there's other people that have that experience that I have, basically. Do you know what I mean? Sure. And so that's the real testament of him being open, him being nice, him being authentic, being a human, basically, and wanting to get along with others. in the conversations, you can see in this series of photos that I have the intentness that he's looking or listening to whatever we're talking about.
Right.
So I think he loved the conversation.
Right.
It told him a lot, that doesn't mean he might have been like that all the time. And, there's times where he could be sick of that. But what I experienced is he liked to get into it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I've noticed with all of the people that have spent personal time with him have said that, they loved the conversation, that this was something that he was great at, besides the guitar playing part that we all know. And then that would disarm you. You'd forget about the guitar playing part.
Oh, totally. It at this point now, when he said, "Hey, stay in touch with me," I had a really great time. He left and sent me text, talking about, like really nice, like really trying to get any kind of weirdness out of the way. Like, you don't need to think of me like this or whatever. Let's now do this deal. And so, like, at that point, then our relationship turned into phone calls.
Mm-hmm.
There's times where I remember I was having I was having some confliction with somebody who I would consider, I guess, was a fan of mine and wanted to hear my record. My record wasn't done. This guy was ill. He was, kind of getting down to it. And he's, saying, "Hey, I really want to hear this before I leave this, planet, and I'm in bad shape," all this kind of stuff. And I was like, God, I'm getting all this pressure. I don't know what to do about this. And my good friend Forrest is like, "Dude, call Ed." So I called Ed and explained everything to him. He talked me through the whole thing on what to do and all of that sort of stuff. So it did get to that point where it wasn't, it was more of just a straight friendship where I could contact him, call him, text each other, this kind of thing. And this is one of the things that is bittersweet about it, because I really feel as though it was a blossoming relationship that would have expanded even more, which is the completion of my record. He wanted to hear my record that I've been working on since that experience in 1981, but he wanted to hear it mixed. So we talked about all of that. He knew all about it. And so, I was trying to get things done because he was going to be the first person to hear this thing. Right. And so he was supportive and helpful with the whole process. But that didn't happen. I didn't get it done in time. And the last communication we had was in June of 2019 or July of 2019, when he was in Zurich, I believe, in Switzerland. When you asked that the other day, or you said that on Johnny Bean's show, which Johnny and I are friends, you said you were going. I was like, Zurich. Oh, were you? I couldn't see the feed or anything.
No, I wasn't in there, but I was thinking it was not live. I was thinking it later. At night I was watching it and I was like, Zurich. My father and mother had been to Zurich, so I kind of knew about Switzerland. We've been over there at one time, but he was over in Zurich getting treatments. Yes.
So anyways, and he responded to me right away. I sent him a text, and literally within a minute, boom, back. And it's like, "Hey, Greg, what's going on? Blah, 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 blah," all this stuff. And I'm over in Switzerland and Zurich. So he would, anytime I reached out to him, he got back to me right away, so he was authentic to his word. Do you know what I mean? So he didn't blow me off in any way, shape, or form, so I think, him and I, we haven't talked about this much, and maybe we're out of time and we can another time or whatever. But in terms of some of the deep conversations that we had when we were together in 2014, it was some pretty heavy conversations about some pretty deep things relating to him and his abilities and the band and his brother and all these other things. And I think in the same way, see, I never thought about this now until you expressed your view on Ed's technique to clear the palate, or however you want,
right.
Is that when I am similar in a way, had to be, from all the clients and things I did for years and years, people coming in my space. But, I went straight for him in terms of the depth of our conversation. I I said things to him that most people wouldn't dream of saying to him.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, I felt comfortable enough to do that for one reason or another.
Right.
And it was stuff that moved him, like physically moved him. I said things to him that shocked him, stunned him, whatever. But he agreed with the things that I said. And I think he appreciated my authenticity and courage to speak to him in that manner, because somebody on that level probably gets a lot of superficial stuff and they don't get real with him right away. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
So in the same way that he tries to clear it, he's hoping that somebody's going to speak stuff with some weight and merit to him, so he can feel like this is a real conversation. Like,
right.
So for whatever reason, that worked for us, and it worked for me. And I was able to share some things with him that were that helped cement his viewpoint on me, I think. You know what I mean? For him to go, hey man, stay in touch, I had a really good time. That's because he liked what I was saying to him. You know what I'm saying?
Well, you were being like you said, authentic to yourself, and you weren't. It's so easy for us, as such big fans to try to please him if you're in his presence, that it's something that he doesn't necessarily want from you. He doesn't want you to try to please him.
Yeah, that's no good.
He wants you to be real to him.
Yes.
And just be on his level, be with him. Totally. And enjoy being with him. One of the things that you didn't talk about before, and we just talked about the final contact you had with him and the unfortunate news we all got. Mm-hmm. That day in particular, where were you and what was your experience with it? And then how did you feel about how he was celebrated afterwards?
Well, I was here at home, and my studio location is where I live. It's two buildings side by side, basically, or one on whatever. So I was at home, and it was very sad. I mean, in some ways, and then of course you have to go, well, he's not suffering and this kind of thing. So there's that. But overall, it was extremely sad. It was a bummer, of course, because I had people saying to me, better get your record done. It's not looking good. Stuff like, what if he passes before you don't get your record done? Like, I heard that a lot because a lot of my inside circle knew my story, knew his role in it and all of that. Mm-hmm. And so they would be planting those seeds. And I just thought, you know what, my record's a purity deal. This relates to what you asked me. It's a purity deal. And there was no way, if you rush it for any reason, you've just sacrificed the purity of your deal, and that there's nothing worth that, even that situation. So I had to adjust in my head that if he doesn't hear it, he doesn't hear it. He already told me. He told me personally, hey man, if I inspired you in any way at all, that is enough for me. So he gave me that, and that means something. So I'm glad that he shared that. I just wanted to authentically earn it and play it for him, and him go, I don't get it, or yeah, I love it. You spent how long watching my feet for what? You know what I mean? It's like, so, and he tripped out on that feet stuff, man. But he thought it was great, but he was just like, wow, so, but that's sparked his interest. Anyways,
that's pretty interesting that you mentioned the feet part to him.
Oh, all of it. Yeah. The whole thing. Not only that, also the Rusty Anderson stuff, I don't know if you know that story. So, or who Rusty. Okay. So
I know Rusty. So,
you do
I know his, yeah.
Okay. So we have the same amp guy, and Rusty was working on something, and he was trying to expand some, recording, miking techniques, something along those lines with his guitars. And so one day he just called me up, and so I'm talking to him, and I didn't connect who he was right away. I just knew, like, our mutual friend Doug Anderson from the Tone Zone, he referred you to me. Okay, I'm not connecting like, oh, this is Rusty Anderson, the badass guitar player that plays, he's got this whole legacy behind him.
Plays with Paul McCartney.
And now, now that's what he does now. But he's got a whole wake behind him of just like, wow.
All the way back to Ed's era, right? He was in the
totally
scene, yeah.
So I'm not connecting this yet. I'm still like, well, you could do it. And then in the middle of a thing, it hits me like, oh, you're that guy. I did. And so I was like, you used to play in bands, that used to play with Van Halen and stuff. So now our conversation just instantly changes from how do you mic stuff and do this and what are you using to you used to play in a band that used to do gigs with Van Halen. So now we just start talking. So I told him my whole story with my feet stuff. And so he agreed with me.
Mm-hmm.
He just pretty much right away just agreed with me. And he goes, I used to think the same thing. I used to stand on the side of the stage and watch Ed play. And I used to look at the way he moved and his feet and everything. And I used to think the exact same thing. He's like, it's like he moves like he's a boxer or something, So I was just like, oh, that's great. Somebody, especially somebody at his level,
sure,
agrees with me. Like, this is so cool. So when Ed was over, I had told him all of that. And I mentioned Rusty. He's like, oh, yeah. And I said, and Rusty told me you used to move around like a boxer. And he's like, I did used to take boxing lessons when I was a kid. Really? So it all just came together, just like, wow. So there's truth to that aspect. So
you figured it out without even knowing that he was,
I think I guess so. I don't want to say that I figured it out. I would just say that's just what happened to talk to me and speak loudest to me.
Right,
because there's so many of us Ed heads. I like to refer to us as Ed heads. There's so many of us Ed heads, and so many of us, have our the ways that we do whatever we do, and each one of them can have their story as to what it was that made them, or what they paid attention to. Maybe it was his ring finger. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, but for me, it was just because of my path and my experience. It was like, oh, these feet are telling me so much. So that's just my story. Mm-hmm. But to have Rusty basically reinforce it or validate it mm-hmm. was great, because when you talk to people about something like that, I mean, I've even seen reviews or people commenting on interviews or whatever. It's like they like to lay into you like you're kook, like, what are you, nuts? Like, but no, that's the authenticity. So you got to take the heat with it. It's like if somebody's going to hassle you about whatever, it's like, hey, no problem. But if my notes don't speak to you, they don't speak to you. But that's the validity of them from the experience. So why should I color code it or change what happened? That's what happened.
Well, like you said, you had the voice come to you a couple times through your life. And, that I had mentioned this to you, and I think in an email, that when I was at the Smithsonian, I had, been scarred for life, not getting that opportunity to shake his hand in '91, right? So this is going to happen, man. At this point, I was focused. I'm going to get the damn picture, and I'm going to look him in the eye, and I'm going to get it done, right? So I walk up there, and I introduce myself, and, I tell him that it's, been 30 years trying to get here with him, and he's like just, wild by it, I guess. And as we finish up, I turned to him to shake his hand. And I already shook his hand once, but then I turned to say bye. And when I did, in my head, it said, this is the only and last time. And that's...
Soak it up.
As I'm holding his hand, I'm hearing this in my head. And I'm thinking to myself, is this me talking or someone else talking? Or am I just reflecting on this moment and trying to soak it up? I don't know what, but I know that moment there was something that told me that was it. Because you
were hearing it.
Yeah, I was hearing it in my head.
Yeah, you weren't thinking it; you were actually hearing it. Yeah,
I wasn't thinking, man. I was thinking.
Yeah.
But in my head, this voice came, and it said that to me. And in my heart of hearts, I wanted to eventually develop a relationship with Edward, like you did.
Sure.
I wasn't thinking this is the last moment, man. I was thinking this is hopefully more down the line. Maybe I'll manifest myself to where you did. Somehow.
Right.
Right. And but no, this is what happened. And then I saw him one last time on his tour. That September. And I sent you a picture of that the color picture I took of it.
Yeah,
the
great shot.
Last show that I saw him at. And sure enough, man, that was it.
Yeah.
And you mentioned this in Johnny's show about the last show that you saw, which was in Hollywood
Yeah.
Bowl, right?
Yeah. Yep. Went with my wife and we sat right at the soundboard and it was beautiful. It was, I was literally tearing up by the breakdown of Light Up the Sky, which was the first tune. I
Wow.
was just like, because first of all, I hadn't seen him with Dave since '84, right? Mm-hmm. But it was a magical thing beyond, because Under the Stars is special. And I'd never seen them under the stars. So that was cool.
I didn't either till that show that you saw. It was first time outside.
Yeah.
And the sound was fantastic, man.
Yeah, I thought they sounded great too.
Wow,
yeah,
wow.
Yeah. So first of all, it was a great view. The Hollywood Bowl, it has an intimacy to it, even though it's big. There's still an intimacy to it, and just kind of the way it's nestled in there in the little canyon area, and you could feel the hometown crowd feel. Like I'm a visitor to the hometown crowd. I'm from somewhere else.
Sure.
So this is the people that went to school with these guys. They know them, you know, and the neighborhoods. There's a lot of pride in Pasadena for this band. Yeah. I mean, they take it very seriously.
They do. You know, one of the things I'll say about that about Pasadena is they take it serious, but they don't want to talk to you very much about it.
Well, that's just it, because they feel in a way that it's
theirs, and they want to keep it.
It's theirs, and I understand that. And see, the thing that happened for me is that Doug Anderson, my amp guy from the Van Halen Museum Tone Zone, him and I actually met organically at another amp guy's, this weird scientist guy who used to work on my amps named Vlado, who was an Eastern European guy, great guy. Do you think he was Czechoslovakian? And I was in his kitchen one day. He's working on my Marshall, and then he would do backup work for Doug in the Tone Zone when Doug couldn't do all the work. So him and I meet in this guy's kitchen, and then we just start talking about Van Halen. You know how it is. It's like you could be in line at Home Depot, man, and you see some other person, guy or girl, and you start talking about Van Halen, and all of a sudden you got a new best friend. Right. That's just it. So. Right. So we start talking, and then it's like, oh, you're going to be my new amp guy. You know what I mean? Right. So Doug becomes my amp guy. And it was cool with Vlado. He was cool about it. Vlado used to stay with Doug. So at times, we hit it off, and Doug, bro, he's literally part of all of the close circle of the guys that we used to work for the band. Sure. The Brodricks and the Rudy Lahrens and all of this. So
and Chris Holmes and all those guys.
Yeah. So that's right. Cause I had the Chris Holmes Destroyer. I got to use it on my record, and that came from Doug, because Doug owns it. Right.
Right.
So,
and he has this thing called the Van Halen Museum. Now, what is this place?
It's part of his shop. So he has his it's a private shop. So unless he works on your amps or you set some sort of appointment with him, it's not like you can just show up and knock on the door. So It's kind of an invite situation, or if you know somebody, like they can get you in. Right. And so Doug is a real huge collector of things, but he's a collector of like cabinets, guitars, pedal boards, like stuff from Ed, like from the band, and then just a huge amount of extremely rare memorabilia, and he just has it because he's the ultimate fan as well, and so
he's been there since the beginning, and he kept it all. Is what happened.
Yeah, he grew up in the neighborhood. Like Los Lunas is right around the corner from his house.
Right.
So they lived on the next block over and a block down. So, he's from there. He went to school with them, all of this, just a few grades behind him.
Of course, I've been to Los Lunas. I've been all over Pasadena and done the tour. And
holy ground.
And I made a video about it. It's called the Van Halen Trail. You can find it on my page. We go to every site.
That's awesome. And isn't it cool to experience that? It's like, isn't it like holy ground? When you walk that, you're just like, wow.
When you think about the little garage out back, the people say he painted the guitars on the clotheslines out back, but then there's overspray apparently on I've seen pictures anyway. I didn't take them. Somebody did at some point. There's pictures on the inside of overspray, and I don't know, man. There's the magic of that home being so small, being their home. They lived with some other families when they first came for just a little bit. Dad finally got that house there, and it should be it should not be a rental house. It should be a historical, and I think it might be.
Yeah. Yeah, it should be. I agree. I have another kind of a friend of a friend, this guitar player guy, Tad, and Tad has been in that house, sat in Edward's old room, Ed Nell's old room. He said he sat on the edge of this little bed in there playing guitar where there's some vent on the floor. Yeah, he's a real great guitar player, and just had this kind of personal moment, doing that. And that's really like, I mean, are there Mozart fans that do this stuff? I mean, I don't know. I mean, certainly they have his residence and he's contributed so incredibly much, and it's just amazing in some other classical performers. But, this is really, this is quite a powerful phenomena in the way that what these guys did affect us, particularly as we're speaking about Edward. So special to make you want to go to all those locations and see where they wrote in the sidewalk, and just the whole deal. It's
right, yeah,
very special.
And they've started to honor him around town with that plaque at the Pasadena Civic, and they've now got a park that they're named a stage after him. And there's more and more. There's another mural that they're trying to get put together out on Pasadena High School. It's amazing, and one of the things when I went there that was really cool was to go between their house and Dave's house.
Yeah,
not far.
Yeah,
but an interesting dichotomy in the two of them.
Oh, man.
And the way they grew up, and just that kind of informs the way this band is. It's got such a different couple of players, in it that just make the thing really unique.
Yeah, because it's like their house could fit between the street and Dave's front gate.
I know, right?
It's just, it's like
crazy, right?
Wow, totally crazy.
It's amazing what they did in their lifetime, man. And but yeah, man, thanks for coming on today, man, and this story, man. It's amazing. And
it's my pleasure.
I'm glad that we got to talk and hang out. And I got some kind of FedEx guy about to pop my door.
Go get him if we got a wrap. So I want to thank you, and I appreciate your stories as well. And it's nice that you and I have had such similar experiences, because I just, first of all, it just makes me think of others, and anything that makes you think of others, I think is a good thing. So the fact that we've had these experiences, that they're similar, that they're inspiring, that they keep us going, and we keep celebrating it. It's like there's not much more we can do, except like the video Ed put out there that somebody was fortunate to grab, where he's like, play, man, just play. If you don't, I'm coming to get you, right? That's really it. And he's kind of got an eternal flame going in each of us. And I'm just grateful we walked the earth at the same time and got to hear it and see it and all of that. So
right on, dude. You know what? That video that you're talking about, one of my guests was the guy filming that.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, that's the Smithsonian that night.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
That's so great. He's got that. That's a historic little clip right there.
It is, and it's gonna live on, man. And it was such a great little clip and a great way of how Ed encapsulated, his spirit.
Yeah.
Towards other people and his plan and everything, man. Such a magical guy with, and this thing that you and I had experienced, like you just said, there's so many of us that have had an opportunity. You would never think that this guy could get his hands around all these people that like us who've manifested our way to him somehow. I mean, there's got to be thousands and tens of thousands of people that he's touched personally, with at least a few moments of his time.
Yeah, I mean, when you see it, it's incredible to see. Somebody he's on the street here, there, whatever it is. He would. I mean, he probably wouldn't like this, but it's like an eminent role model in so many ways, teaching you basically how to be. Treat others how you want to be treated, at least in this respect, in terms of artist, fan, giving people the time of day and all of that. I have to say my favorite thing that I learned from him or that I like about him is that he got to peace with himself. Yeah. That's what I saw. In other words, he was just like, I'm supposed to do this and it's the way it is. So I'm not going to let things bother me. And I'm just going to try and have good interactions. And he actually exuded that. And so that was a beautiful thing to actually see. Like, he just knew it. God picked me for this. I don't know why.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I mean, one of the things I wanted to ask you was that you hadn't mentioned this, and you kind of said this about him accepting his role,
Yeah.
his journey in life. Like he might have really struggled with that up to 2004, in which we know about the rough period he had. Everybody knows that. But there was a redemption, like the guys from Guitar World and I talked about with their book, where they talk about how he comes out the other side of that time. And then he has this magical decade where he, or more, 15 years, where he really accepts his life's journey.
Yep.
And enjoys his last 10, 15 years out there. And really, we were all like, there's no way this guy can leave now. I mean, he was, at a personal high.
Yeah. Absolutely.
There's no way we could just sit there and go, it's just, he was so in such a good place, and when I think about the Smithsonian, and my opportunity, I do not think there could have been another time in his entire life that I could have gotten that experience. I mean, this is the thing where I walk up to him, and the dream that I had in my head, the vision I had in my head, my entire life, happened exactly how I expected.
Wow.
And better. He was in such a good space mentally.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't, and also he had such a good day that day.
Yeah, that's cool.
And been so, I think he felt so honored and grateful that he just exuded such kindness to everyone. And it was a blessing for me to get, after all those years, to have it at that moment. It was meant to be, I guess. You know what I mean?
Absolutely meant to be, for sure. Everything, you freezing, not being able to shake his hand, and you being able to do that, and you're just the whole time you thinking about that, thinking back upon that, now having it resolved and all of that. There's reasons within that stuff.
There's got to be more.
Yeah.
Gotta be more. And this too. You're this kid on the street chasing him around with your necklace. The next thing you know, you're this guy's friend, man. What are the chances? First of all, what are the chances that you would meet anybody at 10 or whatever, and then 30, 40 years later, you become their friend just in general? On the other side of the country, what are the chances anyway?
Exactly. I mean, if all of this talk doesn't remind any of us to just to bow down to whatever makes this a possibility, I mean, really, that's wherever you want to give the glory, however it works. Right. It's like, that's really the big reminder. Bite into that apple, whatever it may be for you, and really extract that sweet juice as deeply as you can. It's not just a boring old apple. No. But try another flavor. You know what I'm saying? It's like, until every bit of your fiber is just analyzing and tasting this sweet opportunity you get for only a brief period of time. And then what you said about Ed, we got to see him go through the gauntlet and come out the other side and be at peace with it. I think it would. I hate to just think, he could have done that, and it would have led to, it is what it is. So we got to deal with the reality. But he did do it. He did get through that, and he did give his glory to whatever name you want to put on it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's when you take a knee, or when you show the example of the ultimate humbleness, gratitude. Mm-hmm. That to me is, you're where you're supposed to be.
For sure.
That's where you're supposed to be.
For sure, man. And
really,
that's led me to you.
and led me to you, right? And anybody who's taking the time to watch this or whatever, I super appreciate the time. For anybody that's stuck around to listen to any of these stories, means a lot to me. And You'd be surprised how
many people like us sit up all night, and this is our TV for the night.
Yeah.
This is what we're going to watch for tonight.
But it's good because it's interactive and enriching back and forth. Like I really do appreciate the time of this conversation and you sharing those stories. And
me too, man. It's such an amazing a journey for us too, and all everybody else, Dweezil and everybody else that's been down this road with us, and Van Halen
Yeah.
family. I mean, we're like a family
I know. Yeah. Yeah.
just amazing. You know, this reminds me of. I'll close with this. It reminds me of something David Lee Roth said on that very first interview with Jim Ladd. He was talking about Unchained, and I think this is a good way to end this. Is that he said some people they don't hit the ground running.
Yes.
Some people just get up every day and they complain and they don't get things done. And he said, you know, that's not you should do more. You should try. You should at least give it a shot. You should do the best you can and try to live your life is what he was saying. And he kind of encapsulated that as part of what he thought about with the lyrics of Unchained. And you know, my tribute band is called Forever Unchained, and
Nice.
that's got, you know, its meanings obviously with my personal story, and I just really I'm grateful that you're here, and I don't know how, you know, it's just so crazy that you know Greg Renoff pointed you
Well, that's
out.
Greg Renoff. Oh,
Right.
Greg Renoff.
All right, Greg Renoff, yeah, my buddy Greg Renoff pushed you towards me. And he said, "This guy right here, you need to check him out."
Thank you, Greg. Thank you so much. I really
Thank you,
appreciate
Greg
it.
Renoff. Yeah, Greg's been
Yeah.
on too, and Greg and I had some great conversations too.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
man, thanks so much, man. You know, you have a great day, man. Keep in touch, and maybe we can do something together someday with Greg and have like a little round table or something.
Might as well jump.
Right on. Hey, one more thing before you go. Let's talk about your CD real quick. You just put
Oh,
out, and it's called Vista.
it's called Vistali Buell. That's a term. Yeah, Vistali Buell. That's a term I made up for my life's journey. That started with that hear about it later moment with the voice in my head. The whole 40 years of chasing Ed by watching his feet and all of that sort of stuff. And then basically, you know, through the meeting and me quitting guitar and stop playing Strats with thin strings and going back to Les Pauls and heavy strings. It's all encompassed in that. It's basically that term means a compelled journey, and the term was created originally out of like names of bands that I liked when I was a little kid, like Pablo Cruz and you know, there's a bunch of others, but I mean, Van Halen is another one. So it's like a mixture of things. That's where the name comes from. The record's 33 minutes and 30 seconds long. It's not a Van Halen sound alike, but it does have the essence. The master's essence is what I aimed for. The listener can decide whether or not it's there. That's not for me to decide, but that's what I tried to do. So it's my 40-year single malt. Right. And it's available at IARErecords.com, and it's available at CraigParkerAdams.com, as well as those Van Halen demo sound alike type things I did back in 2008. Those are also on that same site. So thanks for asking. I appreciate it. Sure,
man. And that's awesome. The Destroyer was used on that. Chris Holmes' Destroyer that was used on Women and Children First was used on that. And I'll put a picture of that in here as well, so people can look at that. You got a video on your website of that where you go through it.
That's right. Explaining all of that, basically explaining the journey, explaining the name and that sort of thing. Also, that cabinet I sent you, that's one of Ed's cabs. I got to use that on the first tune. So I used that on one song, and that was a great sounding cabinet. And then, I got to use the Chris Holmes Destroyer to do a tribute for a great Ed head, one of my favorite Ed heads who sadly passed away back in 2012, a guy named Mark Abrahamian. And that's the guy who did the mod on my Marshall, my 69 Marshall. And he was another great player who got took too soon. So I wanted to give him something, a tip. Sure, a little nod for his that guy's strive for excellence. He exuded excellence. And I love guitar players and people that try their best. They're compelled to do their best.
Yeah, I had a great friend when I was growing up. Was my first bass player, and Final Resonance TV, the name of this channel, was dedicated to. It was one of my tracks off on my first guitar solo instrumental album. Cool. And I dedicated that song to him, and it was an upbeat, a very upbeat kind of major key thing. And this whole thing started around the time of that, so I put his, part of his memories in this channel.
Beautiful.
And so, he was one of the people that helped me start my musical journey, and yours and everybody else's out here that we are celebrating,
That's
and especially our inspirations along the line. So thanks so much, man.
Thank you.
And hit me up anytime
Appreciate
you need anything. You want to hook up anytime? I'll be out in California, probably here and there. I'll hit you up.
Absolutely, please do. And thanks again for the interest and the time. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Craig.
Thank you, Jeff.
Have a good rest of the day, man. I'll talk to you.
Talk to you.
Thank you,
well,
buddy.
everybody. See you, everybody.
Have a good one.